Alright, hey guys. So today I wanted to do a pre-release full beginner's guide for the Spiritforged pre-release. I know this is probably the first time that a lot of people are going to be able to go to one of these pre-release events, and it is structured a little bit differently from the Origins pre-release event. So, I thought I'd be able to, give an idea of what it's going to look like and what you can expect from this type of event. For a bit of background, I did used to play like a good amount of like Magic, so I have a good feeling for how these pre-release events you usually like to play, and as well as like kind of the general format of limited or sealed, how you're generally supposed to build your decks and how you're supposed to play them out. So what is a Spiritforged pre-release event? I'm assuming you've already registered for one if you're going to watch this video, but a pre-Rift/pre-release event is going to be held at your local game store, somewhere between the dates of February 6th and February 12th. So the set releases on February 13th, so the week prior to the release, your local game stores are going to be hosting pre-Rift events for you to kind of get your hands on some Spiritforged cards. This is going to be your first chance to play with English Spiritforged cards in real life, and your first opportunity to crack some packs, because otherwise if you're pre-ordering some packs or boxes, you're going to have to wait until the actual release date of February 13th before you can actually crack any packs. You need 0 cards in order to participate in the event. You will open all the cards that you're going to play with, and you're going to keep all the cards that you open. Each pre-Rift event is going to come with the following one pre-Rift kit, which is going to contain 15 cards and one of the 6 legends that have been selected for the pre-Rift kits. You're going to get 5 packs, and then you're going to get 1 promo card, which is always going to be Yone Blademaster. The event typically runs for about 4 hours. Usually what you're going to see is, let's pretend the event starts at around 6 o'clock. The distribution of product, opening the product, building your deck is probably going to run somewhere around 45 minutes to an hour. And then each round after that is going to take about an hour, probably like a little bit more than an hour because of overtime. It might be probably about an hour and 15 minutes per round. So you can expect 30 minutes to an hour for opening your packs, building your deck, and then 1.25 hours for each round, and it's usually going to be 3 rounds. So you can look at about 4 hours to 4.5 hours for the whole event to finish. How's it work? Show up, register, pay, reserve your spot. Some stores will require prepayment to reserve your spot. Otherwise, you're gonna be able to sign up on the UVS site to be able to reserve your spot. Once the starting time of the event happens, you're gonna receive all your product. It is a good idea to show up beforehand, maybe 10 to 15 minutes beforehand, just to check in and get settled before the event actually starts. You're going to be given some amount of time, so usually about 30 minutes to an hour, to open all your packs and construct your deck. And then once you've constructed your deck, you're going to play 1v1s for additional prizing. It's usually going to be 3 rounds of best of 3. Each match that you win, so each best of 3 that you win, you're going to get 1 more Spiritforged pack. That's kind of an example. Other places are probably going to look at best of 1 if they're starting pretty late into the day, or they'll have like a higher entry fee, and you're going to win 2 packs for every match that you win. But this is kind of the general format that, probably about like 80% of the stores are going to do. What do you need to bring? Okay, you don't actually theoretically need to bring anything. There's a lot of things to recommend to bring, but nothing is actually required if you just want to participate in the event. Recommended sleeves. Sleeves are the first thing I would recommend. You would like to have different colors because you'd like to separate out like main deck plus legends, plus runes, plus battlefields. But like theoretically, your runes and your battlefields can be the same colors if you want. So like 2 different colors is fine. Your legend doesn't need to be a different color from your main deck realistically, because it's just going to be at the front. You're going to take it out before you shuffle, hopefully. Second thing is dice. Dice are pretty useful. You use them to track points. Whatever you score, you just like tick up your die and you're pretty happy. You're going to track like power change, like might changes. So if a unit is going from like 2 might and you like play a spell to buff it up to 4, you can like take a die and put like 2 on top to say that has +2. And then also when you're in overtime, they're useful for tracking turns. So usually these rounds are going to be 60 minutes plus 3 turns. 3 turns. So what happens is your 60 minutes are your like allotted time to play the games. And then you're going to have 3 overtime turns. So the starting player is going to be turn 0. And then the opposing person is going to be... So turn 0 is when time gets actually called. That's the turn 0. The active player is turn 0. And then go turn 1, turn 2, turn 3. And then once turn 3 ends, the game ends. I think most of the time I think it's recommended to use the new tiebreaker rules. So at the end of turn 3, you need to... Whoever is winning by 2 or more points will win. Otherwise, the game is considered a draw. Additional recommendations: playmat. Playmats are nice. Some local game stores are gonna have like big playmats for the entire table, so you don't have to worry too much about playmats. But if you're playing on like just a raw folding table, like or some random table, it's nice to have a playmat. A deck box is nice. You don't have to, get an elastic band or anything to carry your deck around. And then a box for your extra cards, or like a binder for any hits that you're not playing. So say you hit some super rare card that you're not going to add into your deck because it just doesn't fit. It's nice to have a binder for that. If you don't want to separate like out the cards that you've opened for the event, you can just keep them in the box and then put them in the binder after the event's done. I put water / snacks. Snacks like is up to you, but like I would like highly recommend you bring water or some kind of drink, because you end up like talking a pretty significant amount during these events. I normally don't really bring a water bottle around, but whenever I go to these like locals, I'm like through my whole bottle of water plus a little bit more a lot of the time if I can get my hands on any water. So bring water, so you're not like in between round 1 and round 2, you're like thirsty as hell, you're like, sorry, can I like go grab a bottle of water? You like run to the front desk and like try to grab a bottle of water and line up for 5 minutes or something like that. You don't have to worry about that. So water is really nice to have. Recommended is like an understanding of how to play Riftbound. Okay, theoretically, this should probably be in the required line. This should probably be required. Know how to play Riftbound. But like you don't have to be super experienced. It's just a recommendation. Theoretically, you could learn for the first time, but you're just not gonna have a very good time. You're gonna go 0 and 3 pretty swiftly. And lastly, recommendation to understand how the Spiritforged unique mechanics work. There's a few of them, and we're gonna go through them in this video, so you don't have to worry about that too much. So when you're actually building your deck, the way that you're building your deck is different from the way that you're going to build like a typical constructed deck. So sealed, which is what this format is, has their own specific rules. So first of all, you're allowed to use up to 3 domains. So if you're used to Origins or just like normal constructed play, you're allowed 2 domains. So for example, if you played Victor, you'd be blue-yellow, and you're only allowed to put blue cards and yellow cards into your deck, and you'll find that each card has its own color, even if it doesn't have like a power cost, So for example, like a card that costs like 1 energy and 1 blue, that's a blue card, right? But if it's just 1 energy and the body of the card is still blue, it's still considered a blue card. So try to keep in mind what domains your cards are part of, because you don't want to like accidentally put cards that are like outside of your domains, or else you'll like get penalized in some way probably. You have exactly a 25 card main deck. Well, it's 25 or more, but it's like highly recommended by me to stick to 25. Use that as like your goal, 25. So that's going to be 24 in your main deck plus your chosen champ, or a 25 card main deck if you're choosing not to go with a chosen champion. Your signature spells, chosen champions, and legends do not need to match. They only need to match your domains. So if we take an example for Origins, let's pretend you're playing Victor. Let's pretend you're playing blue-yellow, and you have you're playing blue, yellow, orange, or something like that. You open up your Victor legend, and then you open up a Misfortune, which is orange. Like Orange Misfortune. You are allowed to play this Misfortune as your chosen champion, and your legend, your Victor as your legend. They don't need to match, even though in typical constructed play, if you have a Victor legend, you have to have a Victor champion. Same thing goes for signature spells. If in this scenario I want to use like an orange-yellow, so if I'm still in the same example of blue, yellow, orange, I can use an orange-yellow signature spell. I could use Set's signature spell of Showstopper. Or I could use Victor's signature spell of Siphon Power, that is blue-yellow. What you would not be allowed to use is Misfortune's signature spell because it's orange-purple, and you're not part of purple. So you need to stick within your orange, blue, yellow, and as long as you're within that, any cards that you put into your deck are legal. Your chosen champion and your legends are not required. You technically are allowed to just opt out of playing legends or chosen champions. I would highly recommend playing a chosen champion. Highly recommend playing a chosen champion. And it is up to your discretion if you want to play a legend or not. If you do not have one, you draw an extra card on your first turn. If you don't have both, you still only get the one card. So there's not a reason to not play the legend and the chosen champion. You should always play one because you're getting extra value by playing one at the bare minimum. It's up to your choice if you want to opt out of playing a legend. Your sideboard, if you're used to constructed play, you have like an 8-card sideboard. In this format, your sideboard is your entire pool of cards that you opened. So theoretically, let's pretend you're playing orange, blue, yellow. And you have some purple cards that you're like, you know, they're okay, but like they don't fit my deck that well. And you play against someone and you're like, man, my purple cards would be so good against them. After game 1, you're allowed to just go, I'm going to put all my purple cards in. I'm going to take all my orange cards out. Blah, blah, blah. I'm still at 3 domains. Now I'm purple, blue, yellow instead of orange, blue, yellow. That is allowed. That is allowed. So your sideboard is all the cards that you opened. You're still required to run 3 battlefields in your deck, but you're allowed to use blank battlefields if you didn't open enough battlefields or you didn't want to use any of the battlefields that you opened. One thing to note is that your like pre-rift kit, the one that contains the 15 cards, it contains like 1 legend, 1 battlefield, and then 13 actual cards. So you're always going to have like 1 battlefield that like fits your legend. Again, it's optional. You don't have to play that one. You are allowed to use blank battlefields. These battlefields are basically just areas that you fight over that have no actual effect when you're playing the game. Your runes do not need to be opened through your pack. That would be kind of crazy because you're only opening 5 packs. So you would have like, what, 3 runes or 4 runes? Don't worry about that. Your game store will supply runes. If you want to play with like blinged out runes that you got from Origins, like Nexus Knights or packs, you're allowed to bring those, but it's not required. Your game store should supply runes for you. There is new product that's being released where it's just like boxes of runes. So like theoretically, game stores should be using those and like opening those up to be able to supply runes for everyone. Otherwise, I could totally see them taking like Magic the Gathering lands. There's 5 colors, and then they can do like colorless like wastes for like orange or something, and then they have like every other color basically. So don't worry too much about like bringing runes. If you don't have any runes to bring and you show up and they tell you that you needed to bring your own runes, no one else is gonna have runes. So like don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. And then any number of cards, any number of like duplicates in your deck. In normal constructed, you're allowed up to 3 copies of a card. Like let's say you really like Daring Poro, you're allowed to play 3 Daring Poros. If we were opening sealed event and you opened 6 Daring Poros, you're allowed to play all 6 copies in your deck. You're not limited to the number of copies. You're allowed to play any number. Let's say you opened 5 copies of the most overpowered card in the entire set, you're allowed to play all 5 copies of them. So those are the deck requirements. Alright, so let's quickly go over all the unique mechanics. So, first of all is gold. So gold is a new type of token. It is a gear token, and it just exists in your base when you generate them. Most cards that are generating gold is generating exhausted gold tokens into your base. What that means is on your next turn, your gold is going to ready, and then you can use it. What gold does is it basically acts as a one-time seal. It generates 1 power, and in order to generate this power, it needs to exhaust and kill itself. So one time, one-time power that you can spend for your cards, for paying costs, stuff like that. If you don't open copies of the token, like you can just use like some generic card, like you can take a card out of like the pool, out of like your sideboard pool, and just like play it face down, or you can just like put some card that's in a sleeve face down as like a representation of your token. If you don't open tokens, like you don't need to worry about it, okay? But yeah, so that's the gold mechanic, one-time power generation. Equipment. So equipment is a pretty interesting mechanic that has some like finicky stuff. So these are gear. You will play them as normal gear that will enter into your base, and then they will enter ready in your base. These equipment subtype of gear has 2 boxes of text. If you look at BF Sword, the one box of text says equip yellow, which means you need to spend 1 yellow power in order to equip it to a unit. The second text box is flavor text and +3 might. This means that when this equipment is attached onto a unit, it gets a permanent +3 as long as that gear is attached to that unit. When a gear is attached to a unit, it loses its upper text box. What that means is once you attach a gear to a unit, you are not allowed to detach that gear using the gear's effect. So BF Sword has yellow attached to a unit you control. Since BF Sword loses that ability when it attaches onto a unit, you cannot reactivate that equip cost until that unit dies, or you have some other card that is allowed to move the gear around. This is like the most unintuitive part of the gear mechanic. Everything else is like pretty self-explanatory, but just know you are not allowed to move gear around between units unless stated by another card. The generic like average cost for equipping gear is going to be 1 power cost of the associated color of the gear. But as you can see from Spellsonger, it can sometimes cost more. So Spellsonger costs 1 and a green, so it's like the same cost as like Accelerate. One energy and then 1 power. When the if you read Spellsonger, it does kind of say everything that it needs to. Like it's somewhat self-explanatory, but you know, if you open Spellsonger, you can ask what it does then. There's a lot of weird equipment, so just know that anything in like the colored text box at the bottom stays on the card. Everything above like doesn't. So the way you're like supposed to orient these cards when you're actually playing is to like have the unit, and then the equipment goes under it, and then like that bottom text box hangs out underneath the unit so that you can see the little box that says like +3 might or something like that. There's a couple keywords that are associated with equipment that you should know. So the first is Weaponmaster. So if you look at Orange Jax here, he has Weaponmaster. When you play me, you can equip one of your equipment to me for power less, even if it's already attached. So what that means is when you play Jax, if you have an equipment that's on the battlefield that has an equip cost of power, 1 power, and is equipped to another unit, you're allowed to move that equipment onto Jax for free. Note that it is a discount of 1 power. This means that if you're attaching Spellswonger, you still need to pay the 1 energy, you just don't need to pay the 1 power. Weaponmaster is one of the mechanics that allows you to detach equipment from other units and then attach onto another unit. And then the other unique keyword is Quickdraw. So if you look at Spinning Axe, it has Quickdraw. This has reaction when you play it, attach it to a unit you control. It also, when you, So what that means is this Spinning Axe is essentially a reaction spell that's in your hand. When you're allowed to play reactions, you're allowed to play Spinning Axe. It will land onto your base, and it will move and attach onto a unit that you control. This does mean that when it hits your base and tries to attach onto a unit control, and that unit dies from a reaction or something. Say it gets like hidden bladed or something. Then your spinning axe will just exist in base. It will lose the target. It will just sit in base until you attach it some other way. What I should note is that this equip is the slowest speed. It's only when you can play, it's only in open game states that you're allowed to attach equipment onto units. So you can think of it as like the slowest spell speed, like charming a unit, or playing a unit, or playing a gear, or something like that. It is that speed. You're not allowed to use it like in the middle of combat unless otherwise stated. And then the third and last unique mechanic for Spiritforged is the repeat mechanic. So repeat is always going to be on. Is it always going to be on spells? I'm pretty sure it's always on spells, and it basically allows you to cast the spell twice. So Temptation here allows you to move an enemy unit to a location where there's another unit with the same controller. So, for example, they have a unit on a battlefield and a unit in base. You're allowed to move the unit from the battlefield to the unit base, or move the unit from the base to a unit to the battlefield. Where what repeat does is it allows you to do this twice. So instead of spending 2 mana and moving 1 unit, you're allowed to spend 4 mana and move 2 units. Whenever you pay the repeat cost, you're allowed to choose different targets, or you're allowed to choose the same target. It's up to you. This card is considered to cost 2, even if you do repeat it. So if it says something like, let's pretend we're playing with Defy. It's like Defy is like, oh, counter a spell that costs 4 or less energy, and then like 1 or less power. Temptation, let's say you repeated a spell that costs like 4 at base, and then you repeat it for another 4, and you spend 8, it can still get counterspelled because it's still a 4 mana, 4 energy card. Also, the repeat cost needs to be paid when you're playing the spell. You're not allowed to like spend 2 to target a unit with the spell, and then like your opponent like reacts with something, and you're like, oh, let me repeat this. You're not allowed to do that. You need to do both instances right at the same time, and they will both resolve at the same time, I believe. I'm not sure if they like separate into separate triggers on the stack, but just know that when you're playing the spell with the repeat cost, you need to do it when you're casting the spell, not at any point before the spell is resolved. So those are the unique mechanics for Spiritforged. Let's go step by step for how the event's gonna run and what it's gonna kind of look like, and how to construct your deck as well. So first, opening your packs. Obviously pretty simple. The first portion of the event is going to be opening your sealed product. So you're going to have 1 pre-rift kit. This is going to contain 1 legend out of 6 legends. It's going to contain 5 packs, and then you're also going to get 1 promo Yone Blademaster. You're going to have about 30 minutes to open everything and construct your deck. Some places might stretch it out to an hour if they're having difficulty, distributing product to everyone, but just say it's about 30 minutes. As you're opening cards, try not to like think too much about like, oh, this is going in my deck. Oh, this is going in my deck. Oh, this is going in my deck. What you want to do is you want to sort your cards so that it's easier to like take inventory once you've opened all your cards. So you'd like to have like 1 pile for all your commons and uncommons for each color. So that's 6 piles, right? 1 for each color. 1 pile for like all your rares and your epics. 1 pile for leaders. And then 1 like extra pile, just like random pile for your instruction cards, token cards, rune cards, the ones that you're not worrying about too much. The reason for this is like the number of commons and uncommons are like very, very important to basically form the foundation for your deck. The number of cards is very important because the more options you have, the more solid of foundation you're allowed to do. So say you have like 20 cards of one color and 5 cards of another color, like 90% of the time you're playing the card that has you're playing the color that has 20 cards just because you have more options for that. So you want 1 pile for each color, and then you want 1 pile for your rares and epics because these are generally going to be higher power cards. So there's like a little bit more weight onto them and you want to put a little bit of extra consideration into them, at the end you can like look through your rares and your epics to see if there's one that like really stands out to you, kind of thing. And then you want one pile for your leaders, just because they're like a nice starting point for how your deck's gonna be. Oh, theoretically you should have one pile for like your battlefields as well, but I would honestly just put those in your extra cards. I would think about your battlefields last. After that, you want to organize your cards. So, depending on how much time you have left, ideally what you'd like to do is for each color, you want to sort the cards by how expensive they are, what type of cards they are, whether it's a unit, spell, or gear, and playability, which is just like how good the card is. So, if you're like somewhat experienced and you can like look at a card and be like, oh my god, this card sucks, just throw it away, put it with like your extra junk and be like, okay, now we're looking at, you know, instead of 20 cards of this color, we're looking at 15 cards of this color, so it's like a little bit easier to look at. The reason cost is really important is because the distribution of cost for like units and spells in your deck is like pretty important. You don't want to have like a handful of like 8 mana cards, and then you're basically playing Dazzling Aurora without the Dazzling Aurora and without the ramp, and you're just sitting there passing the turn and your opponent's just scoring to 8 for free. So you want to make sure that you're sorting by cost. Ideally, what your piles are going to look like is like ascending order of cost. So your cheapest card's going to be on top, and then it's going to go down and down in terms of cost, and then you can kind of get a better idea of what you're looking at. And then you want to identify what colors you have the most cards for. It's almost always going to be the colors of your pre-riff legend. There's 2 legends for each color. Which isn't like super relevant, but basically what that means is also each legend has 2 colors. So let's pretend you got Ezreal as your pre-rift kit legend. This is blue purple, so there's like a very, very high chance that blue and purple are going to be the piles that have the most number of cards. I would encourage you to play the colors for the legends that you get, for like the pre-rift kit legend that you get, just because it will have the best foundation for constructing your actual deck. Alright, next we want to identify your early game plays. 2 to 4 mana cards are kind of the key to forming a really strong foundation of your deck. You can like look at it as maybe like 2 to 5 mana, but like realistically it should be 2 to 4 mana. This game is like quite fast. If you look at like Magic the Gathering or stuff, like the 2 to 3 mana slots are like very, very, very important. And if you were to convert that to Riftbound, that would be like 2 to 6, because you get like 2 runes every turn instead of Magic's 1 land every turn. But since this game is so fast, I would like recommend 2 to 4 being like really the key spot for where you're looking at in terms of like early and mid game plays. Bodies on board are the most valuable thing. It doesn't matter how good you are at killing units. If you don't have units behind you to actually score points and have you win the game, you're going to lose. You're not going to have enough gas to keep going because the removal is not efficient enough in this game to be able to keep going. You want to identify what 2 to 4 mana units you have access to for each color. Every single color is going to have some number of 2 to 4 mana, 2 to 4 energy units for you to choose from. You want to sort through, see which ones are playable, which ones you even have the most of, and you want to look for ones that are like decent. So ideally, you want them to be on rate in stats and hopefully have an upside and hopefully have no power cost. So I listed, you can see a few underneath. So we have Lonely Poro. This is a 2 energy, 2 might. So it's on rate for stats. So what on rate means is, 2 mana, 2 might, 3 mana, 3 might, 4 mana, 4 might, something like that. You'd like it to have some kind of upside. So Lonely Poro draws you a card. Plundering Poro creates a gear token. And ideally you want it to have no power cost. You can see on below, all of them don't have power costs. They don't have to be on rate in stats. They're allowed to be a little bit under rate if they have like a good enough upside. So if we look at Stellarcorn Herder or Treasure Hunter, they're both 1 under what they should be. But Stellarcorn Herder draws you cards, Treasure Hunter generates gold, so they have like very, very, very high upside. So I'd like highly recommend playing as many copies of these as you have access to if you're playing these colors. Next, you want to identify your bombs. So bombs are win condition cards. These are almost always units, and they generate recurring value and are hard to deal with. They're usually in like the rare plus slots, but you can substitute them with like commons and uncommons on the bigger side. So if you think about like Mountain Drake in orange from Origins, or you're thinking about like Megamech from blue in Origins, like these are just big boys that just sit in the field and are annoying to deal with and just like are hard to remove. They're just so big it's hard to remove. You want to avoid cards that require synergy. You want to find cards that are just good on their own. You don't want to have to support these too much. You want them to just you don't want to have cards in your hand to support them if possible. You want to just play them and win the game. I put some examples down here. So there's like two that I really want to point out. Yone Blademaster, this, from my understanding, is the promo card that you're going to be getting for just participating in the event, and you should be allowed to use it into your deck. This card is actually like quite a good card. This is like a very, very reasonable card. So there is like some justification to bias towards orange because you're guaranteed a decent card, like a quite decent card. What he allows you to do is like run units to trade with units on battlefields to open them up, and then he runs in and he just kills things, which is like super, super, super nice. The other card that I want to point out is Ferris Forerunner. I think this card legitimately might be the best card in the set, as far as like sealed is concerned. If you open one Ferris Forerunner, I would like highly recommend you to play red and to play this card and play as many copies of this card as you can run. It's a really good card. And then like I guess I'll just like quickly shout out Guardian of the Passage and Vanguard Armory. These are like common and uncommons that can do things. Like they're just big enough to just like do things, but I would recommend you not to play too many of them. You don't want your deck to be like super top heavy. You only need to play like 2 or 3 good cards a turn, two or three good cards a game in order to win. So you don't want to put like 8 copies of this into your deck, or else you're gonna have a handful of them and you're not gonna know what to do with your life. So be reasonable with how many you're putting into your deck. Use these common and uncommon bombs as a way to patch up missing bombs from like the rare epics that you've opened. Vanguard Armory is like probably on the better end, but like something like Guardian of the Passage, which is like just barely okay, I would be careful with that. You want to identify your removal. So you want cards that kill your opponent's units, or you'd like cards that kill you want cards that kill your opponent's units, and you like cards that kill big units, and you want cards that kill small units. There's like surprisingly not that much removal in Spiritforged. I was like looking through the list. There's not a ton, but I did put some down below. So Sunstorm is like basically Void Seeker from Origins, deals 4 damage. Sunstorm deals 2 damage or deals 4 damage, which is like both nice. Both modes of it are quite nice. Wages of Pain, I think, is probably gonna be like one of the best cards in the set. Is my guess for sealed. Blood Money is going to be very, very good. Drag Under is going to be like quite good because it doesn't have like a limitation for how big the unit is before you can like kill it. If you look at the other ones, they all like are small. And then the Hard Bargain isn't really removal, but you can like almost count it as removal, because it's a counter spell. If you're just countering something big, it's fine. Just note that like in this game, spells are spells. It's not like Magic where like everything's a spell. I'm gonna counter this giant unit. In this game, it's like only spells that you're countering. So like try not to think of Hard Bargain too much as like a removal spell. It is like a counter spell, and I would like play one at most in your deck. Like you don't want too many of these guys. Then you want to check out your combat tricks. Combat tricks are like pretty important, like especially for this game. Combat tricks can be like really, really blowouty. If you have like a decently sized unit, let's say you have like a 4 might unit onto a battlefield, your opponent needs to like dedicate some amount of like legitimate like number of cards in order to take it out. And so combat tricks allow you to go like 1 for 1 at a minimum, or like it can be like a 1 for 2 or 1 for 3 style trade. Like let's pretend we're playing in Origins and you're like they're running like a bunch of units into your unit that's like sitting on a battlefield, and they're like playing spells to like buff it up to go over your your unit, and you play like Primal Strength, which is like +7. +7 is huge, and it just eats everything. So you spent 1 card, they spent, you know, however many cards, and it just like blows them out. So combat tricks like in this game are like way more disproportionately better than something like Magic. Like in Magic Limited, you're probably only running like a few copies of combat tricks, like maybe like 2 or 3 copies of combat tricks. I would like actually low-key think of combat tricks like almost in like the removal category because of how impactful they are. So you can think of them as removal. I would recommend you to still play a good amount of removal, but if you're like don't have a lot of spells that actually kill things, I would actually recommend you to play like a good number of combat tricks. So those are like kind of the main categories of cards that you want to look at. So, like look through your piles and see, you know, what options do you have access to for each of these things. So it's early game plays, bombs or like late game plays, removal, and combat tricks. So quickly run through some quick deck building tips. I do want to make like another video to kind of go a little bit more in depth for what you are really valuing in terms of your deck building. But really quick. Turn 1 and turn 2 plays are very important. My guess, okay, so we haven't had this type of event before, because in Origins it was modified champion, so it wasn't like exactly the same. But my guess is to have about 5 2 energy units, and then around 5 3 to 4 energy units. So it's about 10 cards in your deck that are 2 to 4 energy. This is like the general guideline. That's my guess for how many. I don't think you're ever gonna be in a situation where you feel like you have too many of these guys in your deck. They're very nice. And if you aren't playing cards on your first 2 turns, you're gonna be losing the game almost guaranteed. Removal is king. Hard removal and damage removal are all premium. I think like Wages of Pain is gonna be a brilliant card, fantastic card. Removal is always good. Try not to get too cute with combos, synergies, and tempo cards. Limit combos where cards are only good together. You want to make sure that all the cards in your deck are good on their own. So what I mean by combos is there are some cards in this set where it's like, have something like this effect has to do with equipment. Let's like have some crazy synergy with equipment, like, and it does nothing if you don't have equipment on board. That means that like if you don't have equipment on board, this is a dead card in your hand. It does absolutely nothing. So you want to like limit the amount of those in your deck. You want all the cards in your deck to be playable in some fashion. You don't want cards that like there's one card in red where it's like, oh, select a unit and an equipment. If it's attached, detach them. If it's not attached, attach them, you know? It's like that kind of card. Like I would recommend you play 0 copies of that card because it's just too limited in its application. Synergies are kind of the same thing. And then like tempo cards are cards that like move units around or like generate you temporary advantage, but make you lose out in terms of value in the long run. So if we look at Origins, a card like Gust is like quite good, and like Fight or Flight are like quite good. But I would recommend you not like to steer clear, like be reasonable with how many of those cards you're putting into your deck. You don't want too many of those cards in your deck. You want any of your cards that like remove stuff, you want them to like actually remove stuff. You don't want it to like temporarily remove stuff and just like put off your problems until later. You know, you want to actually remove stuff. I said a couple tricks are enough. Less spells that make might big. Just play units with big might. You just need enough tricks in your deck for your opponent to be forced to respect it. I think this is like mostly true, especially from like a Magic perspective. However, since removal is like so limited in this set, I think like going slightly higher in tricks is probably fine. So I think like typically in Magic, you're running like a 23 card deck. You're looking at like 2 to 3 combat tricks. I think in this game you can probably edge towards like 5 to 6 combat tricks. Is like probably on the upper end of where you'd like to be, just because removal is so limited in this game. Lastly, put the good cards in. Pile of Good Stuff is a fantastic archetype. You don't want to be like, I'm a combo deck, I'm an aggro deck, I'm a control deck, I'm a blah 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 deck. I want you to be like, I'm a Pile of Good Stuff deck. That's it. And that's all that you really need to be able to win limited games. Don't get too cute. Don't go crazy, you know? I don't want you to be like, oh my god, I have this sick combo. If I draw these 3 cards in the exact order, I'm going to win the game. Don't worry about that. Just put Pile of Good Stuff. Alright. So, general goal deck composition. We're going to have, say, 6 to 8 turn 1 and turn 2 plays. You can probably bump that up to 10 if you consider, like if you include 4 energy, 5 energy, like, try to bump that up to 10. You want to have at least 15 units. I'd say recommend aim for like 17 to 19 units. It's like really tempting to put like a ton of spells into your deck because spells feel really nice to play, especially in this game or in this set where there's like a ton of equipment. Consider equipment as like spells. They're non-units. You want to have at least 15 units minimum. And then I'd say aim for 17 to 19 units. And then the rest are obviously going to be some number of non-units. So 2 to 5 combat tricks. You can probably say, let's say 3 to 6. Let's say 3 to 6 combat tricks. Just because removal is really bad. The rest should be removal, card draw, equipment. Try not to have too many equipments. Equipment is completely worthless if you don't have units to equip. They are like recurring value because every time you get a unit, that unit gets way bigger. You just like really like there's like the nightmare scenario where you have like 4 equipment on the battlefield and you have no units in hand and just sitting there passing. Like I would rather just have 4 more units on the battlefield. So even if you are an equipment focused deck, I would not recommend you go above like 5 equipment in your entire deck. You only really need to have like 1 or 2 in play in order to like really leverage your cards that like to have equipment. You don't need to be building these like uber tanks that just walk around and just kill everything. Try to just have units on board. But yeah, so those are like my general quick guide and tips for how this pre-Rift events are going to go. I do plan on making a couple more videos to kind of go a little bit more in depth. I would like to do a quick review of every single card in the set and how good and bad it's going to be into the new set, as well as, you know, go through the pre-Rift kits, what's in there, what's good, what's bad in those kits, and then maybe talk a little bit about what legends and archetypes there's going to be. Yeah, thanks for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed.